It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha, it's Feedback Friday. So I'm going to do something a little bit different this Feedback Friday. I'm not going to focus on the video that got the most comments because the Bethesda video, even though it had the most comments, I just found the comments. It was one of those ones where I kind of hit a zen. And I'm like, this is just cool to read. I don't feel the need to respond to a lot of these comments. They're just cool to read. Different opinions. Like, I chuckled when the one person said that Microsoft buying Bethesda, they should let, the team behind the Doom games make a Halo game. And I'm like, yeah, I'd play that. No shade on 343, just Halo really needs a shakeup. Halo has been smelling its own farts for far too long. Yeah, those were the sorts of things that I'm like, this is just, sometimes it's better to just have sort of a public square phenomenon and let people say what they want to say and don't overthink it and don't try to box it in, and sometimes that's good. And that looks bad in my shot. So if you like this sort of concept about sometimes just letting people talk, sometimes responding, judgment. We have judgment. This is why sometimes it's okay to judge. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it and can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. Okay, so I am going to focus on the Manly Monday video because I'm telling you, if this Manly Monday hadn't gone well in terms of the comments, I was going to say, okay, tried, failed experiment, don't want to do it anymore. I noticed my frame rate's off on this video. I apologize if it's wonky in the recording. OBS is just acting up lately and it's freaking obnoxious. But, I realized talking to a Leanna Cares client who mentioned some of the video feedback. I just shut down when certain things tell me what I'm thinking. I think you are this, and this. You're falling into the trap of you are doing this, you are doing that. It's so hard to keep an open mind when people keep telling me what I'm thinking. Here's the thing about telling me what you think I'm thinking. My brain is weird. Part of the reason I make videos about things is I don't come at things from the same perspective as the vast majority of people. So if you think you know what I'm thinking, I mean, based on the comments, I can practically guarantee you're probably wrong. The people have tried to mind read and tell me what I'm thinking. No, you're wrong. And the problem is you're so wrong that I have no idea how you got there in your assumptions about where I'm coming from. And this, you're falling into the trap thing, I admit, it pisses me off and I avoid those comments because it's not going to be productive. Because my opinion is on you're falling into the trap. What trap? What trap? Why are these traps? Isn't this supposed to just be open ideas? People have to realize I, like most people, don't live in the culture war. These traps you're talking about are artificial constructs of the culture war. This belief that good actors are unintentionally feeding the bad actors. One could argue that this in and of itself is a trap set by bad faith participants, okay? This is what bad faith participants in cultural issues do. They parasite off of otherwise unreasonable positions to peel people off towards one extreme or the other. No, people accusing me of falling into a trap. No, I am not going to cede logic to extremist positions. Because here's a truth that a lot of the people making these comments aren't going to like and are probably going to have an emotional response to, but sometimes the truth hurts, okay? The hardcore feminists, the manosphere types, each extreme keeps saying the other extreme is the problem, and they're just reacting to that extreme. To the rest of us, y'all sound 85% exactly like each other. And everybody else is tired of it. The political extremes are 18% of the population, creating the majority of the content, especially the monetized content and not just opinion, but also news, because there's so little money in these spaces now that only the people that are invested in a certain outcome get involved in it. And both of these extremes engage in extremely charged language with a shit ton of mind reading, some form of, if you say this, you are either a bad person, because you must be a bad person to hold this view, or you are unintentionally aiding bad people. This is where people check out, right? This is where people stop listening to you. And then people who sort of inhabit these extremes or adjacent to these extremes wonder why they don't get benefit of the doubt. Here's why. You're not giving benefit of the doubt. When you come at someone, you're falling into a trap, or this is what you're thinking. Why should anybody listen to you? Because the minute you attempt to mind read and you're wrong, well, you've committed some sort of logical fallacy because you're wrong. And so you've given the person who you tried to mind read a reason to not listen to you anymore. You're way off base. Your fundamental assumption, your starting assumption is wrong. Therefore, logically, the vast majority of what you say next is probably going to be junk. Now, that's a heuristic as well, but people only have so much patience. And people generally prefer to listen to people who, one, seem to know what they're talking about, and two, are giving to get. So they want benefit of doubt, so they're giving benefit of doubt. They want to be heard, therefore they're open to listening. Common sense, right? But these days, common sense is neither. So for the rest of this video, I'm going to read some very interesting comments on the Manly Monday video about, a brief history of masculinity kind of thing. And they're all over the map in terms of opinion. And that's the whole point. Because these are people who just added to the conversation instead of standing in judgment of the conversation. And that's what I want to reward. Because, oh my God, there are too many knee-jerk judgments and everybody's fucking tired. So here we go, in the spirit of positivity. Quoting what I said, the being average is no longer enough for a good life issue is interesting, as that's a criticism common in manosphere discussions about finding a desirable partner in these modern times. Now, I want you to focus on that. Finding a desirable partner in these modern times. Okay. The apparent issue, based on the data gathered from various large dating portals, is that the overwhelming majority of attractive women only truly desire a much smaller elite of men, which such technology enables them, and the expectation to be exceptional drives them to pursue. Desirable, physically attractive women. Desirable elite of men. Okay, you see how that branched right there? Even though the probability of success is correspondingly low, while the likelihood of being repeatedly used and discarded, probably to the detriment of outlook on men, is very high. I guess they meaning attractive women. But choosing someone comparable is perceived as settling for an inferior deal. And that is a very significant gendered phenomenon, aside from the fact that this may get exaggerated as it helps some cope with what would not actually meet even a realistic average. This is both the complaint of lonely singles, as well as one reason that leads many men going their own way, even those who could compete, to believe it's not worth the hassle. And the reason my ears pricked up on this comment is because I'll remind you of last week's when somebody accused me of wanting to feminize men because I'm more of a Peter Parker type and less of a like Jason Momoa, Aquaman, Chris Hemsworth, Thor type. Like I'm more it reads as human to me. Super muscular dudes like that, maybe it's too many Rob Liefeld comics in the 90s, but guys that muscular no longer read as human beings to me. And that's not saying I'm dehumanizing. I think they shouldn't be treated like humans. I say my brain doesn't read them as humans. And this weird dichotomy we get into in these discussions of ideal woman, physically attractive, ideal man, some other sort of elite, or the meatbags, the Chris Hemsworths, the Jason Momoas, even though those dudes don't even look like that all the time, only when they're making those movies. Maybe knowing about bodybuilding culture and the training cycles helps me like recognize this, but you can't be that big and low body fat all the time. Your body will compensate and you will lose the ability to get there. That's why it's harder and harder for these guys as they age. But the problem is these ideals are so enforced in our society that when you don't go along with that, you're treated as a liar or some interloper or some evil of some kind. And I am so beyond sick of that, which is not not what the commenter was trying to say. I'm just, again, adding to the dialogue instead of judging the dialogue, right? Another comment. I call what you call masculine performance the term manology. I like this. I define it as the cultural study of expressions of masculinity, historical and otherwise, for the purpose of personal gain and social capital. I also say that masculinity is simply a word meant to describe human behavior, not an entire philosophy in itself, and that masculine behavior is unconscious and derived from anatomical influences. Okay. The second someone hears that they did something masculine and they start trying to act out that masculine expression they did, it's now no longer masculinity, just manology. I say it that way because it's catchy. LOL. Okay, interesting. I juxtaposed it with this other comment that's sort of in the same vein, but coming at it from a completely different perspective. This is odd to me because I would never really tie man to masculine. I tie it more innately to human male. A man isn't less of a man by virtue of being feminine or not occupying a breadwinner or combatant or other typically or stereotypically man role like that. They're just men who occupy atypical roles and expressions. Tying it hard into some amorphous notion of masculinity seems ultimately unworkable. Man is a constant state that's tied to measurable qualities, whereas masculine is more of an ideal and not even a very consistent or reliable one at that. It would seem to necessarily follow from this definition that anyone who is not sufficiently typically masculine isn't a man regardless of any other factors, which I would perceive as only making sense to insane reactionaries and insane radicals just going at it from opposite ends. What if being a man, therefore masculine, while the other insisting masculine, therefore man? That's a very intellectual take on basically what a lot of us are saying in our own ways is, can we not assign social or hierarchical values to things that really shouldn't have them, right? And for trans people, that whole male thing is a real difficulty because it's not fair to someone, this whole sophistry of I support trans people, but they're not men or they're not women or whatever. The J.K. Rowling sophistry, right? Like, no, you don't support trans people if you're saying they're not the gender identity they want to be accepted as. You can't have it both ways. You just can't, you know? And this is why I'm trying to get people to understand that when we talk about men and we talk about women in our society, we are not talking connotatively, contextually about that physical state. We are talking about a collection of behaviors, signifiers, hierarchical status principles that, because the dialogue keeps getting driven by, what did the commenters say? Insane reactionaries and insane radicals, right? It never settles. In my lifetime, I've gone from, the 70s, where toy gendering was at its all-time low, to the androgyny of the 80s, even as toy gendering was creeping up, to the 90s, where everything was fucking princesses for girls. And now we're in this kind of split where we have all these gender categories and people are confused because this happened in my lifetime. And okay, some people think I'm old, but I ain't that old, right? It is. It's fair to call some of this insane, right? And this ties into something, I guess the commenter hasn't seen my previous stuff, but I'm going to read it because I think a lot of the masculine uncertainty comes from economic uncertainty. The prevalence of good blue-collar careers with low barriers to entry has lessened immensely and been replaced by a bloated service industry. Now, an increasing number of young adults are working service and gig jobs that offer little to no career advancement, and they don't feel like they've made it the way their parents' generation did. Even college has lost a lot of its immediate utility. The upward shift in hiring standards to require bachelor degrees, even for basic white-collar work, has served to devalue the impact of getting a degree. And the administrative bloat of colleges and universities, coupled with the exploitative for-profit models, has made the cost of higher education skyrocket. The old rite of passage for young men was taking that blue white-collar fork in the road and making a good enough living that they'd be confident in their ability to take care of themselves and a family for the foreseeable future. Now, everything is a lot more uncertain, and you can hardly tell if you're 6 months from an economic catastrophe, let alone plan to take care of yourself in a retirement with much confidence. This all leads to a generation of men struggling to find a path, becoming bitter, and wanting easy answers. This is where all the obsessions over masculine pursuits and attacking scapegoats intensify: guns, pickup artistry, wolfpack theory, homophobia, misogyny, idolizing recklessness and obnoxiousness, etc. It's all low-hanging fruit for aimless men, and it works because the elites have succeeded, particularly in the US, at wearing down the public's class consciousness. And I think that was really well stated. It's just important to recognize that class consciousness and the ability for upward socioeconomic mobility is a very recent, the idea of a middle class, so on and so forth, is a fairly recent human invention. And the fear, right, among those who study economic trends was that an anomaly? Are we slipping back into class structure because our systems still... What happened is, at the temporary period where work mattered, right? People of the boomer generation got a job at a factory, worked that sort of job until they retired, and then they lived reasonably well in retirement. Within a generation, college degrees became the gateway to a good life, right? You wouldn't struggle the way your parents did with periodic unemployment, right? But then that bubble burst. There were too many college degrees, not enough jobs that really needed them. And this is what gets into the cycle but this is 1, 2, 3 generations, and now boom, crash. Yeah. It's led to this culture war phenomenon where people of the same class structure are blaming other people of the same class structure for class-based problems that they did not cause. And there's a lot of finger pointing and no developing of solutions, because the solutions prescribed by these, insane radicals or insane radical solutions, that a lot of them got us into this mess in the first place. So thanks for your comment, commenter. This next one's long, but it was such a fascinating perspective that I may skip over some of it. But as a 21-year-old assigned male at birth person that now identifies as non-binary, this video resonated a lot, and I have a few thoughts about it. First off, it took me until I turned 21 to even understand that I was non-binary, because I spent the time until then trying my very hardest to conform to an ideal of masculinity. I was overdoing my masculinity to not have to think about the myriad things about me that didn't at all conform to masculinity. This mostly showed in my obsession with fitness from the age of 16 onwards. While going through my fitness journey, I also realized I was into men, but suppressed that because I thought of being into men as feminine. The next big part of my journey happened around the same time. I became obsessed with knowledge. While I've always been a very curious person who wants to learn as much as possible, this happening at the same time as the fitness obsession caused me to get up at 4 a.m., work out, shower, then immediately make my way to school, where I sat in the library learning. When I got into the working world, I'm paraphrasing here, shortening the comment, the combination of my obsessive, I have to get shit done personality and dual study had me obsessed both on work and college, getting me close to a burnout. Since going into therapy was something I viewed as non-masculine, I didn't go until much later, only making the situation worse. I'm fine now and still work there. The video showed me how I incorporated historical male ideals, wartime obsession with wanting to serve in the military, obsession with knowledge, obsession with career, without ever having lived through the times these ideals stem from. Now, as an openly non-binary person, I still work out 6 times a week and look mostly like I did, but now that I like to wear femme clothes to change my silhouette. I like using nail polish. I like having hairstyles that can quickly be rearranged to look like typical male-female hairstyles, and I'm openly pansexual now. Now, the masculine ideals in today's society can be contradictory, but I think this is largely a political issue. They break down into, right-wing, left-wing. I'm not going to do it because I don't want to hit any buttons. I want people to listen to kind of closing comment. Categories serve a purpose. They reduce the infinite complexity of the individual down to boxes we put people in, necessarily limiting the acceptable self-expression of the individual while providing us with value by reducing infinitely complex beings down to something we can actually conceptualize. Mwah, that was beautiful. I think that I subconsciously wanted to fit into the category of man masculine so my parents and peers wouldn't have a knee-jerk reaction to me. Mwah, beautiful. Basically, if I hadn't conformed to that category and instead showed my actual personality, this might have been too different to my looks and ideals at the time and made me harder to put into a box, the complexity making me harder to interact with. I am of the opinion that opening up our definitions of man, woman, etc. keeps the value of reducing complexity while allowing people more freedom of self-expression because the box they want to fit into has been expanded, allowing for a wider range of expressions. This video helped me understand that the stuff I wanted to conform to stems from societal ideals having become ingrained in our culture, pressuring me to behave in certain ways. And first of all, I shared that because they just put, I was like, in moments because it was so well expressed. But this is the viewpoint of somebody who tried so hard to conform. And I think there are a lot of people who tried really hard to conform and, hit the same place I did. I just fucking can't. Okay, I can't fit into one of these neat boxes you want to shove me into. And I'm tired of getting rejected. I'm tired of getting punished because your system doesn't factor in all people. Your system forces certain people to work themselves to exhaustion to conform to things they're just never going to be able to conform to. That is not a problem with the people. That is a problem with the system. And the reason I keep chipping away at this stuff is because I think like a game designer, if systems should allow people to either play the way they want to play or teach the system well enough that anyone can learn if they put in enough work. It is achievable. And currently, our meat space system, in so many ways, doesn't allow either, right? Men get these impossible like status ideals. Commenter off the top. And women have to be, no matter what else women are, they also have to be in this very rigid, narrow standard of beauty that changes surprisingly quickly. All these people with Brazilian butt lifts and butt implants. Oh, wow. When the trends change, I'm not sure what's going to happen. Which freaks me out. I've never understood this idea of bodies being in fashion, body types being in fashion. Because human tastes don't change that much. And part of the reason I am open about my atypical preferences, because I worked. One of the first things I did with my women's studies education was worked on a highly sexualized late night show that had dancing girls and women in a hot tub, and we interviewed porn stars. It was a trial by fire, man. And one of the things I learned is that what men in large groups are actually interested in was not what media was giving them. The whole BBW thing, the muscular women stuff that's starting to peak, out now. These do not surprise me, because working on a show like that, producing a show like that, hosting a show like that, I found out firsthand what the interests and preferences and diversity of stuff is out there. And I think there's a real psychic pain, like cognitive dissonance, when this is what you're supposed to like is pushed on you, and it's like, well, I don't like that, right? And you don't want to be mocked, you don't want to be punished, you don't want to be rejected for liking something abnormal. You notice I did not call BBW fanciers or people who like muscular women fetishes, because I don't think those are fetishes. Those are human beings that you happen to find attractive. That is not sexualizing something that is not inherently sexual. And that's what a fetish is to me. It's the example is like, clowns are not intended to be sexy, but then we get Harley Quinn, and well, there went that. But I think even then she wasn't intended to be sexy. She started on a kid's show, but there you go. The human experience, the experiences of individual humans are far more diverse, and the ranges of what is healthy is far broader than our world currently allows for. And the reason I sort of keep coming back to video games, despite all the frustrations with it, one, we're willing to have these fights, right? Part of the reason the rest of the world hates and fears us is we're willing to look at this stuff, and we're willing to question this stuff before anybody else does. But it's also, in a game, you can escape from the judgments of the world. I know that's why I love RPGs, is that my natural tendencies, my natural choices tend to get rewarded in an RPG. Whereas in the real world, in any scenario, they would be punished harshly just because of expectations about what I'm supposed to be. And I think that's why a lot of people, like, why are you fighting over video games? Well, because it's not fighting over video games per se. It's fighting for a pocket of reality where we feel, if not accepted, then at least not actively rejected. And when you put it that way, I think anybody can understand it. It's not fighting over a game. It's fighting for our right to self-validate and our right to individualize and individuate and not have the world come in all the time and go, you're wrong and bad, conform to this thing you're not, right? And the interesting thing is you gaming is a space that what did the commenter call it? Aimless men. I may have gotten that wrong, and I apologize if I got it wrong. I'm looking for the comment now. Yeah, aimless men, or men that feel like the world has left them behind, straight cisgender men, and LGBTQ plus people, and as we've seen by the statistics, Black people, and people from all around the world because of localization in the languages. We all came into this space for the same reasons, because we felt more accepted and at least not rejected. And then the culture war showed up and pitted us against each other. And that's why I started this as a gaming channel, and it ended up being as a breakdown sort of gender studies, something wellness. There is a theme of self-acceptance that with, the stuff I do on Mondays and the gaming stuff on Tuesdays and the Oneless Wednesdays. It's the path to self-acceptance, the journey to realize that what the world thinks about you is not nearly as important as what you think about yourself. That does not mean it's not important at all. It's just you cannot navigate what the world thinks about you if you don't know what to think about you. If you don't like yourself, you can't navigate the world judgments in a successful way. And I know for me, gaming was a big part of my path to self-acceptance, and I think it can be for other people. So that's why I keep battling through the people who think they know what I think better than I know what I think. I think you can understand why that irritates me based on what I just said, right? All right. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for somebody who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend, and thanks for your feedback.